Troy and Megan were excited to spend a day hiking the trails of Black Hollow Woods. They had heard so much about the beauty of the forest, especially during the autumn season when the leaves turned vibrant shades of red, orange and gold. It was a perfect escape from their busy city lives, a chance to reconnect with nature and each other. The autumn air was cool and crisp, with the scent of fallen leaves and damp soil hanging in the air. Every step they took crunched softly underfoot, the ground a mosaic of colourful leaves. The forest floor was a rich tapestry of life, with mushrooms sprouting from decaying logs and small critters scurrying about. The trees were vibrant with red and gold leaves, and the forest seemed peaceful, even serene. Sunlight filtered through the canopy, casting dappled shadows on the path ahead. It was a scene straight out of a fairy tale, and for a moment they felt like they were the only two people in the world. But there was something unsettling about the deeper parts of the woods, where the trees grew thicker and sunlight struggled to reach the ground. The air seemed to grow colder, and the cheerful chirping of birds was replaced by an eerie silence. It was as if they had crossed an invisible boundary into a different world, one that was darker and more foreboding. As they ventured farther from the trailhead, they noticed an odd stillness. The usual sounds of the forest, rustling leaves, chattering squirrels and distant bird calls, had all but disappeared. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The birds had stopped singing, and the breeze no longer rustled the leaves. The silence was almost oppressive, pressing down on them from all sides. It was a silence that spoke of hidden dangers and unseen eyes watching their every move. It was as though the forest was holding its breath. Every step they took seemed to echo in the stillness, the sound of their footsteps unnaturally loud in the quiet. They exchanged uneasy glances, but neither wanted to be the first to suggest turning back. They should have turned back, but curiosity got the better of them. They pressed on, drawn deeper into the forest by a sense of adventure and the hope of discovering something truly remarkable. Little did they know, they were walking into a nightmare. Hours passed, and by the time they realized they were lost, the sun was already sinking below the horizon. The warm golden light of day was giving way to the cold blue shadows of dusk. Panic began to set in as they realized they had no idea how to get back to the trailhead. The once beautiful forest now seemed dark and menacing. The trees, which had seemed so welcoming in the daylight, now loomed over them like silent sentinels. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat, and the path ahead was swallowed by darkness. The air grew colder, and the smell of decaying wood filled their noses. It was a smell that spoke of death and decay, of things long forgotten and left to rot. It was a smell that made their skin crawl and their hearts race. Megan shivered, glancing nervously at the twisted shadows cast by the rising moon. The moonlight, which should have been a source of comfort, only served to make the shadows deeper and more menacing. She clung to Troy, her fear growing with every passing moment. "We need to find our way back," Troy said, though there was no trace of the path they had come from. His voice was steady, but Megan could hear the fear in it. They were alone in the dark, with no way of knowing which direction to go. As they tried to navigate their way through the trees, a strange sound echoed through the woods, a low, rumbling growl, followed by what sounded like whispering. It was a sound that sent chills down their spines, a sound that spoke of something ancient and malevolent. Megan's eyes widened as she grabbed Troy's arm. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The growl was unlike anything she had ever heard before, a sound that seemed to come from the very depths of the earth. Before he could answer, the forest erupted with noise. The silence was shattered by the sound of something crashing through the underbrush, moving with alarming speed. It was a sound that spoke of danger, of something hunting them. Something was moving through the trees, crashing through the underbrush with alarming speed. It was getting closer, and they could hear the heavy breathing of whatever it was. It was a sound that filled them with a primal fear, a fear that drove them to run. They ran, their breath coming in panicked gasps as the growls grew louder, closer. The forest seemed to close in around them, the trees a blur as they sprinted through the darkness. They could feel the creature's hot breath on their necks, could hear its growls growing ever closer. The stench of rotting flesh filled the air, and they could hear the heavy breathing of whatever was chasing them. It was a smell that made their stomachs churn, a smell that spoke of death and decay. It was a smell that drove them to run faster, to escape the horror that was closing in on them. Branches whipped against their faces, and the ground seemed to shift beneath their feet. It was as if the forest itself was trying to trap them, to hold them in its dark embrace. They stumbled and fell, but each time they got back up and kept running, driven by sheer terror. It was as if the forest itself was trying to trap them. The trees seemed to close in around them, the path ahead disappearing into darkness. They could feel the forest's malevolent presence, could feel it watching them, waiting for them to make a mistake. Megan stumbled and fell, screaming as Troy pulled her to her feet. Her ankle throbbed with pain, but she forced herself to keep running. She could hear the creature's growls growing ever closer, could feel its hot breath on her neck. They ran faster, hearts pounding in their chests, the sound of the creature right behind them. It was a sound that filled them with a primal fear, a fear that drove them to run faster than they ever had before. They could feel the creature's hot breath on their necks, could hear its growls growing ever closer. But as suddenly as it had started, the noise stopped. The forest fell silent once more, the only sound their ragged breathing. They stopped, gasping for air, their hearts pounding in their chests. They looked around, but there was no sign of the creature. The woods fell silent once more. It was as if the forest had decided to let them go, to spare them from whatever horror it had in store. They stood there, shaking and terrified, unable to believe that they had escaped. Shaking and terrified, they finally stumbled out of the trees and into a clearing, gasping for air. The moonlight bathed the clearing in a soft silver light, and for the first time in hours they felt a glimmer of hope. They had escaped, but the memory of that night would haunt them forever. The forest had shown them its dark side, had revealed the horrors that lurked within its depths. They would never forget the fear, the terror, the feeling of being hunted. Have you ever found yourself hopelessly lost in the woods? Have you ever felt the fear of being hunted, of being trapped in a place where no one can hear your screams? It's a feeling that stays with you, that haunts your dreams and makes you afraid to ever set foot in the forest again. Beware. Stay vigilant, because there are terrifying creatures in the woods that few have ever seen and lived to talk about. The forest is a place of beauty, but it is also a place of danger, a place where the line between life and death is thin and easily crossed. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and follow us for more. We have many more tales of terror and adventure, stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat and make you question what you thought you knew about the world. Join us on TikTok and YouTube for more bone-chilling chronicles. If you dare,